Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 562 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Jose from Los Angeles.
Hi, Jose. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to, I'm not sure if you or anyone's ever talked about on the show before. I just wanted to get your general thoughts. What do you think of market socialism?
Of market socialism?
What's
Correct.
that?
Broadly speaking,
What are your thoughts? Do you like it? Do you support it, or do you not support it?
I don't really know.
I don't
to
think,
be honest with
I
you.
don't-
I haven't really given it much thought as to whether I support it, as a prescriptive measure.
Correct. Yeah. I don't know. Just pass a policy that says any corporation, say over 100 employees, must be converted to worker cooperative, for example.
To nationalize. I mean, I think, broadly speaking, I think I would probably end some type of public ownership to necessities. So I'm not so concerned about, public ownership or worker ownership of, let's say, I don't know, eraser. I'm just looking for stuff on my, like a stapler company.
Right.
But I would like to see public ownership of power generation in this country. I would like to see public ownership of housing in this country, at least much more of it. I would like to see public ownership of internet, communications in that regard.
When you say public, do you mean state ownership, or are you referring to worker cooperatives?
I would say state ownership. I mean, I think I think we can encourage worker ownership for a lot of things, and there's been proposals in the past for it. But broadly speaking, I would say state ownership for those type of companies. I'm agnostic, frankly, at the idea of I don't know, name a company. The Oregon.
Let's say converting the big corporations like Walmart, Target, Amazon to worker cooperatives. That's not something you would necessarily support, or it's just not something you really think about.
I mean, for me, I'm more interested in actually breaking up companies of that size, and then
I'm open to nationalizing some of them, but I mean, Caller, do you consider China market socialist?
No, I consider China state capitalist.
Okay. Well, how would you distinguish for people listening?
One would be worker owned and private corporations owned by the workers, and one
Correct,
would be owned by the state, right?
Because I don't see state ownership is too much better, only because the workers don't have control over their workplace. They'll have to listen to bureaucrats. They decide their wage or their hours. As opposed to the workers, I feel like they should decide, hey, we should get paid this much. We are entitled to the profits here. Stuff like that,
Well,
And
I mean,
China's
it's not. First off, it's not mutually exclusive, right? State control in terms of what kind of say workers would have in their workplaces, but I mean, profits. I think the idea would be. I mean, I wouldn't want necessarily energy delivery, let's say, to involve profit.
Yeah, I mean, practically speaking, I would start with nationalizing key industries. And yeah, I get that in the immediate bureaucracy, that's not an incredibly democratized field. And I think that's something to strive for by, for instance, cultivating democracy in the country. But I these things I see them more as sort of provisional rather than something to be dealt with when the time comes in policy, rather than should we decide we're going to not do any markets, or should we decide we're going to do some markets if they're co-ops, or I just think it's too abstract. I'd rather get more concrete on it if you want to drill down.
But I'll tell you this: I would be
Would you? Sorry. sorry. Would you say like instead of like maybe not focusing on co-ops, would you support like decommodifying like all essential resources and goods?
Would I be in favor of decommodifying all goods, or like?
Yeah, at least that's what I support. Like like housing, food, energy, banking, oil.
Oh, essential stuff.
Yeah, not like everything. Yeah, essential stuff to, like,
Yeah, no, I mean that's my point. That's my point of what I call nationalizing, or I guess you could say
provided.
socially, publicly provided, is to decommodify them. So, healthcare and power generation and internet, like communications. I am okay with, I guess, some private banking existing with private banking as long as there is a robust public option.
The big banks are nationalized, though.
More or less at this point.
But at least I fall under the ideology of Libertarian Leftist. And so, I'm pretty anti-capitalist, but I'm also, in general, pretty anti-state.
Right.
But I do work with, like social democrats and stuff. Like, I know we can't just abolish the state altogether, and the state serves good purposes. But in general, I am pretty libertarian in that sense. That I don't like what China does with their state-owned enterprises, where, like I said, the workers don't have too much control over their workplace. Or even in the NHS, for example, a lot of the clinical workers, are striking and all that stuff because they just don't have that autonomy in the workplace, to control their wages, their hours, their benefits, all that stuff, And that's why I feel like market socialism or worker cooperatives, for me at least, are a big priority to tame these corporations, because decommodifying all these, at least from my perspective, decommodifying all these essential resources is really difficult as long as you have corporations lobbying and having all this power.
Well, I mean, that's
cooperatives.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, I get the idea that but now you're moving into sort of like the possibility of these things, and I do not subscribe to the notion that you can that there is a magic moment where you'll be able to eliminate enough. Well, I mean, you have a problem also with state control, but enough of the of private enterprise to rid society of this desire to dominate by certain, individuals or groups of individuals. I just don't think it's a one and done type of project. And so I don't
think what would happen if, like, by magic, let's say, like at the snap of your fingers, all corporations and businesses with over 100 employees must be converted to cooperatives. You don't think that would have big effects on the...
Well, listen, if you're going to give me the power to impose anything by snapping my fingers by magic, there's a lot I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean...
You know what I mean? Like, but my point is, like, what, you can't go from a grounded conversation into one with the snap of the fingers.
Yeah.
I mean... If I have the ability to impose that with snapping my fingers, there's a lot of stuff I'm going to do that I'm going to do by snapping my fingers. But the point is that I think that, like, first off, I think that the actual functioning of those companies would be far more difficult than, because you're starting at ground one, at building block. All of a sudden you're going to have to create all of these structures. And so if I was to snap my fingers and give nobody any type of ramp up, I think it would be a problem. Like, that's
that was a bad thing on my side. When I say snap the fingers, I guess I was just trying to say, like, assuming like a shift in that direction were to happen pretty quickly.
I just finished Lenin's Political Thought Theory and Practice in the Democratic and Socialist Revolutions, and my précis on that, and maybe someone could correct me, is that initially, yes, there's a revolution, and we're going to move to this democratic control, and we're going to prioritize that. And then it turns out that actually we might need a certain level of hierarchical, like these are, and then towards later in life, he's like, well, maybe we actually do need more democracy. Like these are, this is a tension that needs to be navigated rather than one that can just be prescribed.
That's my whole point with, like, this is not a one and done type of thing. It is a constant, I think, that you need this tension because there's no way to function without it. And where that equilibrium lies, I don't know. And the idea of me like wishing where that equilibrium lies is just, it's just honestly, it's meaningless in that respect. I mean,
yeah, I get it. I mean, it's wishful thinking on my end. I mean, most people here barely support, social democracy.
Yeah, but I don't. Let me put it this way: like, in pursuit of something like that, I think only good things come along that way. And I don't know where on that journey I would say like this is where we should stop. And it's more like I have no problem heading in that direction where we democratize both like these industries via the state, as long as we maintain, obviously, like, like the Chinese state is, I think you'd agree, more authoritarian than our state.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, we're not going to necessarily have the same problems. I'm not as concerned as, conservatives that if you give the U.S. the ability, instead of just like super regulation on power generation, you basically just say like, okay, we now own this. There's no shareholders. The American public is the shareholders. And, we'll continue the people who are operating the thing, but we don't need to have shareholders in this. And we're going to provide this, and we're going to take that money that was going to provide, shareholder value or, whatever the payments out to shareholders, we're just going to reinvest that in upgrading the system and constantly keeping. I mean, that
sounds a bit kind of like what social democratic countries do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
And I like a lot of things that those countries do. My only problem is they kind of get stuck there. They don't seem to move any more left. And sometimes there's a lot of neoliberal push towards the right in those countries, which is why
that seems to be the trend. I mean, I understand that. And I think there has to be a constant, but the idea that you're going to get to just worker controlled companies exclusively, and there's not going to be any attempt within those companies or through industries to sort of narrow control over it once it's there. I just don't think that happens. I just think that like
Do you think it won't happen because the average person doesn't want it, or because the state's going to stop it? Or
I think because in the individual entities, frustration arises, and the idea of one person coming in and saying, "Hey, look, I got the answers, and I'm going to do this." I mean, like that's how
you want to know how I see it as? I don't necessarily see it like that. I just see it as spreading democracy to the workplace, kind of like how we do so many other things.
I understand. But I mean, I was down at Zuccotti Park we were talking about today, and there was, full Democratic meetings. And what I witnessed was a lot of people going like, this is not working. And, you didn't have people necessarily come in and take over there. They just left. But in these situations, I mean, look, we have I'm willing to put an asterisk in quotations around it, a democratic country now. It's not inconceivable to me that we could elect somebody who's going to come in and strip away a lot of those democratic, protections and functions and whatnot. So if it can happen with a country, it can happen with, a company.
Right.
Appreciate the call. Thanks, Jose.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.